We only checked the nanny cam because our daughter had been sleeping badly. We scrolled back through the night, expecting nothing. And at 3 a.m., the footage showed a man sitting on the floor beside her crib, just sitting there in the dark, watching her breathe. We had never seen him before in our lives, and he was still in the house when we watched it. Welcome back. It's just you and me and the dark tonight. 3 true stories about the little cameras we point at the people we love most, and the things those cameras catch when we're not looking. The footage we were never meant to see. Let's begin. Our daughter was 2, and she'd started waking up crying in the night, inconsolable, pointing at the corner of her room and saying the word man. Toddlers say all kinds of things. We figured it was a phase, a nightmare the shapes a nightlight throws on a wall. But it kept happening night after night, and she got more and more frightened of her own room, and finally my wife said, "Let's just look at the camera." We had one of those little nanny cams on the shelf, the kind that records to an app. We'd barely ever used the playback. We sat down together one morning while our daughter napped, and we scrolled back through the previous night to see what was scaring her. For hours it was nothing. Her asleep, the dark room, the occasional shift and sigh of a sleeping child. We were fast-forwarding, half bored, half relieved. And then, at 3 in the morning on the timestamp, my wife's hand grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. There was a man in the room. He was sitting on the floor beside the crib with his back against the wall. A grown man in dark clothes that we did not recognize and had never let into our home. And he wasn't doing anything. That was the worst part. He wasn't reaching into the crib, wasn't moving, wasn't stealing anything. He was just sitting there on the floor of our daughter's room, in the dark, at 3 in the morning, with his head tilted toward the crib, watching her sleep, watching her breathe. For over an hour, on the footage, he just sat and watched her. And then, near dawn, he stood up, slow and careful, and stepped out of the frame toward the door, and was gone. I have never moved so fast in my life. We called the police, we grabbed our daughter, we got out of the house and waited in the locked car. And the police searched, and they found how he'd been getting in, a basement window with a broken latch. And they found signs he'd done it more than once. Food wrappers, a blanket behind the water heater. He'd been coming into our house at night for who knows how long and going up to our daughter's room and sitting on the floor and watching her sleep, and leaving before we woke. And our little girl had been telling us, in the only word she had, man, man. And we told her it was a dream. For weeks afterward, I kept a notebook by the bed and wrote down everything the police told us because my mind kept trying to soften it, to make it smaller than it was, and I wouldn't let it. He'd been in our home more than a dozen times, they thought, based on the wrappers and the wear behind the water heater. More than a dozen nights he'd let himself in through that basement window while we slept 20 feet away, and climbed the stairs past our own bedroom door and gone into our daughter's room and sat down on the floor and watched her. He never touched her. He never took a thing. That was almost the worst of it, that we couldn't even say what he wanted, only that whatever it was quiet and patient, and it involved sitting in the dark beside a sleeping 2-year-old for an hour at a stretch, and that our daughter had known the whole time. She'd been pointing at that corner and saying the only word she had for months, and we, her parents, the 2 people in the world whose entire job was to keep her safe, had tucked her back in every single time and told her there was no such thing as the man. They never caught him. and we moved and we got a real security system, and our daughter, thank God, is happy and healthy and doesn't remember any of it. But I remember the footage, and I've never told my wife the thing I noticed watching it back that second time when the police asked us to review it. Because in that hour he sat there in the dark watching our daughter breathe. There was a stretch near the middle where he slowly turned his head away from the crib toward the camera, and he looked directly into the lens. For a long time, like he knew it was there, like he knew that one day we'd be sitting here, watching him, watching her, and he wanted to be looking right at us when we did. That man wanted to be seen looking back. The next woman's household had something else entirely. A nanny who, every single mealtime, quietly set a place at the table for a guest none of them could see. The nanny was wonderful. References, experience, gentle with the baby, everything you'd want. The mother watched the cam from work sometimes, the way parents do, just to check in, and at first she saw nothing but good care. But then she started noticing it at meal times. The nanny would feed the baby in his high chair, and she would set a second place at the little table. A plate, a cup, a spoon laid out at an empty seat, and she would talk to it, turn to the empty chair mid-meal and say something, smile, nod, the way you would to another adult sharing lunch with you. Except there was no one there. It was just the nanny, the baby, and an empty chair set for a guest who did not exist. The mother told herself it was harmless. Maybe the nanny was lonely. Maybe it was a game for the baby, an imaginary friend, a way of modeling table manners. She almost let it go, but it started to bother her more the more she watched. Because the nanny didn't do it like a game. She did it like a habit, like a courtesy, like there really was someone there, someone she was used to, someone she set a place for without even thinking about it. The mother went back and watched weeks of old footage after that, unable to stop herself, and she started to see it everywhere once she knew to look. The way the nanny would pause in a doorway and step politely aside to let someone pass. The way she'd pour 2 cups of tea. The way the baby and his bouncer would sometimes go still and track something across the room, his little eyes following a slow path at exactly the height of a grown man walking by. None of it was frantic. None of it was frightening on the surface, and that was worse than frightening. It was domestic. It was a household of 3 that only 2 of them were alive to see. The nanny had never once been afraid in all those weeks, because to her the man at the table wasn't an intruder at all. He was a fixture. He'd been there when she arrived, sitting in that chair, and she'd simply, kindly made room for him, the way you'd make room for a shy relative. And the question that kept the mother awake wasn't who he was. It was how long he had been sitting at that table, waiting for someone, anyone, to finally notice him and set him a place. One day the mother came home early, quietly, and stood outside the kitchen doorway and watched it happen in person. The nanny feeding the baby, and beside them, that second place set at the table, and the nanny turning to the empty chair and saying warmly, "I know, he's getting so big, isn't he?" and pausing, as if listening to a reply, and then laughing softly at something the empty chair had said. The mother, shaking, stepped in and asked the nanny as calmly as she could who she was talking to, and the nanny looked up completely unembarrassed and said, "Oh, the man who sits with us. He's here every day. He's very fond of the baby. I assumed you knew." And she gestured at the empty chair, at the plate she'd set, and she said, He was here before I started. I thought he was family. They let the nanny go, not because they thought she'd done anything wrong. She clearly, genuinely believed she'd been sharing her days with a member of the household. They let her go because of what she believed, and because of the way the baby, when they really watched the footage back, would sometimes follow something across the room with his eyes. Something at the height of a grown man. Something that pulled out a chair at every meal and sat down. They never found out who set the fourth place. But the mother told me they moved, and they never hired another nanny. And to this day, she sets their table carefully, deliberately, 1 plate per person, and clears any extra chair from the room before they eat. One family learned to count their plates. The last couple tonight had to watch their own baby's crib, because on the monitor, in an empty room, it had started rocking gently, all on its own. A couple had a video monitor over their newborn's crib, the kind with a live feed and a record function. Standard stuff. And one night on the live feed, the mother saw the crib rocking. Not the baby moving, the whole crib, rocking gently, side to side, the way you'd rock a cradle to soothe a child. Except no one was near it. The baby was asleep on its back, still, and the crib was rocking on its own, in the dark, in an empty room. She ran in. The instant she opened the door, it stopped. The baby was fine, asleep, undisturbed. The crib was a solid, modern crib. It didn't even rock. It wasn't built to. She checked it, pushed on it, and it barely budged. There was no way it could have been swaying like that on its own. But she'd seen it. And her husband, when she made him watch the recording, saw it too. The crib, in the night vision green, rocking steadily, side to side, in a locked and empty nursery. For almost 10 minutes, the recording showed it. Someone or something patiently rocking their baby to sleep. They told themselves it was a glitch, a trick of the compression, the way digital video sometimes smears and wobbles. And they might have believed that if it had only happened once. But it kept happening. Every few nights the crib would rock, always after midnight, always stopping the moment the door opened, and the baby, they noticed, slept better on those nights. Slept through, woke happy, as if something were taking care of it in the dark, as if something in that house had decided the baby was theirs to watch over now. She tried to hold on to the old comfort, that a thing which soothes a baby couldn't possibly mean it harm, but she couldn't make it hold, because the more she thought about it, the more the arithmetic frightened her. Something had decided her child needed watching over in the night. Something had appointed itself. And things that appoint themselves to your children don't tend to give them back. She started to notice the baby reaching up in the empty nursery toward a face at cradle height that wasn't there. Started to notice him laughing at nothing, in the dark, on the monitor, at the same hour every night. It wasn't that the thing was cruel, it was that it was fond. And she could not shake the feeling that its fondness was a kind of claim, that it was night by night, lullaby by lullaby, humming her baby a little further away from her, toward some place she would not be able to follow. That should have been a comfort, maybe. It wasn't. Because one night the mother didn't run in. She stood in the doorway of the nursery in the dark and watched the crib rock with her own eyes, in person, no screen between them. And in the pitch black of that room, over the soft creak of the crib, she heard it. A voice, low and tuneless and tender, humming. A lullaby to her sleeping child from the empty air beside the crib. She took the baby out of that room that night, and it never slept in there again. They moved within the month, and she told me she'll always wonder whether the thing in that nursery meant her child harm or love, or whether to a thing like that there's any difference at all. She only knows that something had been rocking her baby to sleep night after night, and that it did not like being interrupted, and that the last time she watched the footage back, in the final seconds before she'd opened the door, the thing rocking the crib had gone still and turned and looked at the camera because it had heard her coming down the hall. That's all for tonight. If this one's got you thinking twice about the little camera in the corner, then you know exactly what to do. Subscribe and hit that bell, because there's a brand new true horror story here every single night, and you won't want to miss the next one. Give this a like so it finds the next person in the dark, and share it with any parent you know. I'll be right here tomorrow night when the lights go down. Sleep well, if you can.
Like, share, and subscribe for daily horror stories every single day.